Right. Well, greetings, everyone, and Shabbat Shalom. Happy Sabbath to everyone here. Yeah, very good. Shabbat Shalom. And not only here, but also those that are on the live stream. Um, it's just, you know, I've been in the booth a couple of times, and I can see how, people log in, and we just want them to be acknowledged. And everyone doesn't respond. So for those that are on there, just know that if you're on there, unless you make a comment, we won't know who you are. It just says, 24 people on. And then as soon as you make a comment, then your name will pop up, and that's why if only certain people agree that, that's why. We're not playing favorites. It's just we can't see you till you make a comment. And I know some people want to remain anonymous, and that's fine. But I know some people that do log in quite often. I still like to send out to the Heath family up in Canada. I've just known them so many years, and I just want to remember to speak out to them from time to time. Also, Steve and Laura up in Arkansas, wonderful people that met at the feast about 3 years ago and 2 years ago. And they bring joy to my heart every time I talk to them. So I want to speak out, shout out to them, as well as all the rest of the brethren who log in, whoever you are, knowing that we are all seeking to serve the same one, that Yahweh is our Father. And I'll explain why I chose the title Yahweh Leads in just a minute. I want to read a couple of verses, a couple of passages in Scripture. The first one I want to read, actually four, couple implies two, but I have four of them. So let's go to the first one, Ecclesiastes 12. Ecclesiastes 12, and I'm just going to read about 6 verses here. We're going to start in verse 9. Ecclesiastes 12, starting in verse 9. And it says, and more than that, or I know in some translations it says, and moreover, it says that the preacher was wise, and he still taught the people knowledge. Yes, he listened, and he looked, and he set in order many proverbs. The preacher sought to find out words of delight and words of truth written in uprightness. The words of the wise are as goads, yes, as nails driven by the master of collections that are given from one shepherd. And we know who that shepherd is. Verse 12, and more than these, my son, be warned. And I do like that term admonished, that's in the King James, be admonished. The making of many books has no end, and much study is awareness of the flesh. Let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear Yahweh and keep his commandments, for this applies to every man. For Yahweh shall bring every work into judgment with all that is hidden, whether it is good or whether it is evil. Let's go to Matthew 22. Matthew 22. I'm just going to read 4 verses here. Matthew 22, we're going to start in verse 37. Matthew 22, starting in verse 37. Matthew 22, 37, Yahshua speaking. Verse 37 says, and Yahshua said to him, you shall love Yahweh, your sovereign, with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the first and great command. And the second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these 2 commandments, all the Torah and the prophets hang. James 1. James chapter 1, and we want to start verse 5. I'm sorry. James 1. Let's start in verse. Let's start in verse 20. James 1, starting in verse 20. And it says, for the wrath of man does not work out the righteousness of Yahweh. Wherefore, remove far from you all impurity, in the abundance of wickedness, and with meekness receive the word that is implanted in our nature, being able to save your souls. Verse 22, but become doers of the word, and not hearers only, deceiving yourselves. Because if anyone is a hearer of the word, and not a doer, this one is like a man studying his natural face in a mirror. For he studied himself and has gone away, and immediately he forgets how he looks. And the one looking into the perfect law of liberty and continuing in it, this one, not having become a hearer of the word, which can be forgotten, but a doer of the work, this one shall be blessed in his labor. And let's read one more, 1 John 5. First John 5. First John 5, and let's just start in verse 1. I was going to stop at 4, but I think I'm going to read a little bit further than 4. 1 John 5, starting in verse 1. Everyone believing that Yeshua is the Messiah has been regenerated or born from or begotten from Yahweh. And everyone who loves him, who begets, also loves the one who has been begotten of him. By this we know that we love the children of Yahweh, when we love Yahweh and keep his commandments. For this is the love of Yahweh, that we keep his commandments, and his commandments are not a burden to us. Because everything having been born or begotten of Yahweh overcomes the world. And we just read that with Tino. What did Yeshua say? I've already overcome. Overcomes the world. And this is the victory which overcomes the world, our belief. I know some say it's faith, but our belief, our trust in him. I'm going to read a little bit further. Who is the one overcoming the world except the one who believes that Yeshua is the Son of Yahweh? He's asking that question. This is the one overcoming through water and blood, Yeshua Messiah, not only by water only, but by the water and the blood of Messiah. I wanted to lead off with those few passages because my title here is Yahweh Leads, and I had quite a few notes. I didn't know quite what direction I wanted to take it, but I do know this. I've been thinking about this for a little while, and then it was reaffirmed when Cheryl started coming here, and I'll tell you why. And then again when Larry spoke last week, and he said something, and I was just like, I guess next time I speak, I guess I'll talk on it. And the reason why I call this Yahweh Leads, and we've talked about this before, when people come and they visit and they fellowship with us. And one of the things when I talked to Cheryl afterwards, I could tell she was kind of hesitant, and it was after services. And then she's like, well, I wanted to ask you something. She had a question. And it's not what the question was that's driving this, what me wanting to say all this. It's the fact that the trepidation she had because of past experiences. Once again, I can't stress enough, in this walk, we are all trying to get to the kingdom. We all want to serve Yahweh. We all want to live righteous lives and do the right thing. And that can't be done if every time we ask someone a question that we just met with anger, hostility, or suspicion, and I was glad that she felt comfortable enough to ask. And not just me, but I've seen her talk to other people. And then participating in the fellowship, here. And, a conversation, I didn't ask Fred if I could say this, but just with him and them sharing this, being able to feel welcome and not like you have to go through some type of initiation in order to serve Yahweh. And I know I've talked about some of these things before, but I'm getting to the point. The reason why I say Yahweh Leads is, let's just be clear. We're not here to lead one another. We're here to serve. We're here to serve the body of Messiah. And that's why I'm saying and Larry covered some of this last week. I'm not going to go into a lot of what he said, but I just wanted to, he used some of the things I was going to, which is great. I don't have to repeat it. But when he was going into depth about the serving and edifying the body, I agree with that. That's what we're here to do. We want to talk about, spreading the word, and I've heard people talk about discipleship and sharing in the word. What does it matter, the knowledge that you have in your head, if the spirit within you is not right? There should have been no place that Cheryl attended where she felt less than, or that she couldn't ask a question. Or when she did ask a question, like, when people get suspicious, you ask a question and they assume, like, why are you asking that? What are you trying to get at? That should never be That should never be our thought when someone asks a question. It should be like, I've never thought about that. If you haven't thought about it. Oh, that's interesting. Or if it's a question about our practice, then we definitely should have an answer for that because we're practicing it. Everyone in this room. And when I'm going to read more scriptures, we all should be able to do that because it's the life that we live. And I want us to realize that it's Yahweh who leads us. And I know we all say that, and we're like, yeah, Yahweh leads, we follow him. But just let's reflect on our lives. How often or how many of us have lived like that our whole life, that it was Yahweh who's leading us and not a person? Just think about the conversations that we've had in our life, and when something's going on, we lean over and be like, hey, what do you think about that? What does it matter what they think? And I'm talking about me. I've done that before, and I should have listened. Like, what does it matter what they think? Because it's the life that Yahweh has given me. And if Yahweh is leading me, then who I need to do is like, Yahweh, what do you think about this? What should I do? Because if we believe Scripture, then we know what Yahweh says when he said he would never abandon us. He would never lead us. And you know what Yahweh does? Then he will send the proper person, the proper message in our life to give us that answer. Or we'll read it in his word. I can't tell you how many times that has come in my life where I just want to know, what should I do? And then all of a sudden, I'll just read a verse. And that's what I needed. Or I'll have a conversation with a brother or sister, and they'll say something. I'm like, that's exactly what I needed. They didn't know that they were being used as a vessel of Yahweh to help me. And it wasn't for them to. Because I asked for an answer, he provided it. And then my response should be, praise Yahweh. And I'm saying this too, a lot of you all have done that for me. And I praise Yahweh for that. That's why I praise Yahweh for this fellowship. And we have to realize that's what it's about. And the reason why you may not know the effect it has is because Yahweh doesn't want us to become haughty. Too many people want to know, now I gave you an answer that we should thank them all of a sudden. No. That's not what that's about. It's about us serving one another. It's about us knowing that Yahweh leads us and recognizing the way in which he does it. The way in which he does it. So I don't plan on being up here overly long. There's some scriptures I want to go over. And I just, when you think about how Yahweh leads, it's real simple. Yahweh leads us by his word. And his word can come whether we're reading the scripture. His word can come if maybe he inspires Amy to say something to one of us and be like, oh, remember this scripture? I'll give you an example. When I read that in 2 Kings a couple of weeks ago about Yahweh saying when he took that child because he saw good in him, that helped me. That was a message that helped me, that edified me and helped me to realize and understand a lot of things about how Yahweh operates in my life. So that's through his word. He teaches us and leads us by his spirit. Tino did a great job in the Bible study when he was speaking earlier, and he was just reading the words of what Yeshua has said. And Yeshua said, what? I have to go so that the comforter can come. And what it will do for us. And the beauty of it is all of us need something different. All of us in different places in our life. And through his word and through his spirit, it helps us to realize that Yahweh is leading the way, and it's not always as we see it. For those that aren't in this room, we got Brother Tony here. I love him, Brother Tony's here. I enjoy his fellowship. But Yahweh had put him in a place and has given him a calling where he's out of the country a lot of times. But when he's here, I relish it. Because it's not about me. That's my choice. No, he'd be here all the time. But Yahweh had moved him to move around and to go to different countries and do things. And now he's here. And it's funny because there's the way the government is working. They're sending people back and forth and doing things. And with a Brother Tony, too, he's not here ranting and raving like, I want to go back right now. And I got all my paperwork in order. And what is wrong with them? Oh, injustice. No, you know what he's doing? He's enjoying the Sabbath. Because he knows that, hey, he did everything he was supposed to do, and yet these things are still going on because we just don't know what Yahweh is keeping him from or leading him to. That has to be our mindset. We can't always say, I've heard the universe is plotting against us. And I was really moved to speak on this because here's the thing. When I was talking about this with my wife when we were talking, the things that are going on just in this world, the things going on around us. Brother Tino's sharing how, dealing with the fire department or the neighbors that are having a hard time next door. They have some fire damage but don't have house insurance. We got sisters where, and brethren that are going through things in their life, and the word that kept coming up was powerless. When things go on beyond our control, after we've done everything we can do, and they still don't work out, there's no worse feeling than to feel powerless. To know we have no control over it. I have felt that it's not a good feeling. Maybe some of y'all are stronger than me, but I have felt that, and it's angering because the thought that was going through my mind is, why won't they just do the right thing? I've done everything right. Why won't they do their part? I had to go to court one time, and I had to say this to the judge. I said, it's a shame that because we have a legal system, we don't always get justice, Your Honor. I said, I can't trust you or this system to do the right thing, because sometimes the thing is even taken out of the judge's hand. They have a practice they call mandatory minimums, that if you commit a certain crime, even the judge, even if they want to, can't give you a lesser sentence. It's just like a template. Oh, you did this? Here's the minimum I can give you. And a lot of times, that punishment does not fit the crime. When I was 16 years old, and my son is sitting back there, but he's not 16 anymore, so he's got to cover his eyes. I was being foolish. Me and my friend, we were coming from basketball practice. We thought it'd be a good idea. We were going to race home, right? And so, I don't know if you remember these older cars. His mom and them at the time had one of those Delta 88s. Those are huge cars. They're big and heavy. And my mom had one of those Ford LTDs, another big, those big engines. So we decided we're going to race home. So we're going back and forth, and where my mom lives, it's all just 2-lane roads. So we're racing, and I found a spot to get them. I got around them, zoom, but of course I had to pass on the left-hand lane, which is oncoming traffic. Zoom past them, get around them. I'm like, yeah, beat them, turn the corner. All of a sudden, these lights come on. State trooper. His name is Ronnie Withers. Hadn't forgot his name. He lived right down the street from Harvey, my friend that I was racing. So he gets out of the car, and he's like, you two are in trouble. And so he told Harvey, you go home. I'm going to be down in a minute. I'm going to talk to your dad. And he gave me this, right, it wasn't even a ticket. And we do this. You go home and tell your mom, and Don Burkett, which is the district attorney at the time, he's going to be in touch with you. Now, I'm telling you this story because of this. That state trooper knew we were being silly. We didn't commit a felony. We were being stupid. Could have been dangerous? Absolutely. But he caught us. But the point was he wanted to teach us a lesson. And instead of, writing a ticket, taking us to jail and all this, which he absolutely could have done, what he did is he told on us. He told our parents, called the district attorney. The district attorney's like, oh, okay. Made us get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, and we had to go pick up trash on the side of the road for like 5 miles. We got there about 4 in the morning, and we picked up trash until, and the lady that took us out, We didn't get to ride with her. She dropped us off, and she said, I'll meet y'all down there. So that was our ride. When we got to her, yeah, that's how we got home. And we picked trash up all day. And they had us out there, and back then, now they give those nice orange vests, so we just were out there in clothes, and it was hot, and it seemed like on that particular day, everyone we knew needed to be on that road, because they would come and be like, what y'all do? And then they talking, does your parents know? We're going to tell you. They know. That's why we're out here. And everybody was telling, then the younger people were laughing, but we didn't do that again.
Put a deterrent.
Right. And the point is, he had the leverage and latitude to do that. And now, that seems to be taken off the table. Now you get in trouble with the law, and you're going to pay this exorbitant fine, or you're going to jail, or there just seems to be no let the punishment fit the crime. And so what I told the judge was, I can't trust that. I can't trust this system. So even when people are wrong, when you go to court, you have to say not guilty, which means I didn't do it. When you enter a plea of not guilty, you're telling the person you're innocent, you didn't do it. Even if you did, because a lot of times with these mandatory minimums and things, you cannot trust the system to just say, oh, you did it, you're admitting to doing it, okay, let me now mete out justice. They can't be just. And because we can't trust them to be just, I have to say not guilty, and we go through all this rigmarole to get what should have been done in the first place, which is justice. Because if you admit it, you get this fine, you get this consequence that is unfair. But if you don't, and they get tired of arguing with you about it, they'll say, okay, let's make an agreement. Let's just, no fault, no this or whatever, and, we'll let you do community service. Well, that's what should have been on the table, but if I admitted guilt, you wouldn't have given me that. Just dealing with that alone and having to play that game is a sense of just hopelessness. You feel like, I just have no control in this situation. I can't trust people to be righteous. I can't trust people to be just. I can't trust people to do anything. And just by the way, I'll say this. I see the children in this room, just because you think they're maybe playing, or maybe they're sitting in the back or doing whatever you don't think they're hearing, they are. Because here's something that one of my children said to me the other day. They're like, that's what the adversary wants us to do. He wants to create a situation where we get so tired, we get so fed up, we just want to turn our back on Yahweh. And that's what hopelessness will do. You don't think Job felt hopeless when he lost everything? And that's why his wife said, just curse him and be done with it. That's hopelessness, brothers and sisters. And I get it. I get it. Let's not sit here and act like, oh, shame on her, tisk on her. If you lost everything you own, you lost all your finances, and more importantly, you lost all your children, and you're trying to tell me you would sit here and be like, oh, Yahweh reigns, I'm going to call you a liar. Because if we wouldn't, then none of us in here, when things happen, we wouldn't get that tear in our eye. We wouldn't get choked up when we have to talk about these hard things that we go through in life. But we do. Because it shakes us. And at that moment, we are feeling hopeless and down. And we need to encourage one another and to edify one another. And we need to remind each other that it is Yahweh who leads us. That's why it's not one another, because we're all dealing with different things. The only one that can truly lead us is the one that's perfect and strong. All powerful, all knowing. And he's just asking us, just trust me. Just trust me. And that's why I wanted to read those scriptures. We look in Ecclesiastes, he said the whole duty of man is to what? Fear Yahweh and keep his commandments. That's all you got to do. Matthew, Yahshua even broke it down. There's two things you got to do. And if you can't remember both of them, just remember the one. Love Yahweh with everything you got. 1 John, we can overcome all things with our belief in Messiah. And Tino gave a wonderful message just now about when we believe in him, what that can do for us. Because here's the thing. When Yahshua was talking to his taught ones, and we just went through that, praise Yahweh, we just read all that in John 16. See, what Yahshua was preparing his taught ones for is to live a life like ours. See, we take for granted. See, what the disciples had never experienced, and we forget this. For 3 years, they lived with Yahshua. They walked with him. That's why I remember when John, the beginning of John, he says, what we have witnessed, what we have seen, what we have touched with our hands. They had access to Yahshua right here. And he was preparing them because he's about to say, look, I'm about to be gone. And Yahshua knew that was going to be traumatic for them. And it was. It was. Have you ever tried to teach someone to swim and they're hanging on to you, and as long as they got you, they're good? And you're like, okay, I'm going to let you go now. It's like trying to peel a leech off you. Every time you move them off, they just grabbing everything you got. They are not going to let go. And that's what Yahshua was trying to prepare them for. They did not. They're like, wait, what you mean you're going to leave? We read it. And remember, they're looking at each other. What is he talking about? This wasn't no casual conversation like, I wonder what he meant by that. It's one of those, I know what he means. I can't believe he's saying this. You going to leave us? What are we going to do? And that's what he said. No, I'm not going to leave you alone. We read the whole thing. He was trying to prepare them. This is what you got to do. Here's the thing. But we have lived our entire lives without him physically next to us. They weren't. That was a change for them. And what we have to realize is all these words, that's why it's so important to read them again, is to understand this is how Yahweh leads. By his word, by his spirit that Yahshua left for us. And he says, and with that, what? Then me and my Father will abode with you. And that's the third way he leads us, through his Son. I separated word in Yahshua. Yes, we know Yahshua is the word made flesh, but the word can come whether we read it, whether we speak it to one another, and by his Son, Yahshua. So let's read a few scriptures. Let's go to Psalms 118. I just wanted to have some scriptures of encouragement. Psalms. So I want to give some examples of each one. So Yahweh leads us through his word. Psalms 118. I'm sorry, 119. Not 118, 119. All right. Let's start in verse 105. Psalms 119, verse 105. And the psalmist, and we know David wrote these, he's speaking here. And he says here, Psalms 119, verse 105, he says, your word is a lamp to my feet and a light to my path. I have sworn, and I rise to it, to keep your righteous judgment. I'm greatly afflicted, O Yahweh. Give me life according to what? Your word. Please, O Yahweh, accept the free offerings of my mouth and teach me your judgments. My life is in my hand continually, yet I do not forget your Torah, your law. The wicked have laid a snare for me, yet I do not wander from your precepts. I have inherited your testimonies forever, for they are the rejoicing of my heart. I bowed my heart to do your statutes, always to the end. All these come from his word. He's shown how he leads. Isaiah 55. I know many are familiar with this verse here, Isaiah 55. I think I just only want to read verse 11, but once I get there, I may want to read around it. Isaiah 55. Yep. Isaiah 55. Now, the verse 11, I got it highlighted here, but let's start a few verses up. Isaiah 55, let's start in verse 6. Isaiah 55, verse 6. He says, "Seek Yahweh while he may be found. Call on him while he is near. Let the wicked forsake his way and the man of vanity his thoughts, and let him return to Yahweh. And he will have mercy on him and to our sovereign, for he will he will abundantly pardon. For my thoughts are not your thoughts, nor your ways my ways, says Yahweh." Once again, so we have to change that thinking. We have to change that thinking. Like I said, everything's not conspired against us. It's either a lesson or he's trying to encourage us, protect us, teach us. Go ahead, Cheryl.
That's why we need Torah, because our thoughts are not his thoughts.
Right.
And if we want to worship him according to the way he desires, we need to find out what his thoughts are, and
Right.
that's in Torah.
Exactly, what he has said. Because he had it written down for us to show us. Mm-hmm. That's why when we read that in Psalms 119, he talked about what? Your precepts, your law, your words, all these things. And to what Cheryl said, yes. So he says, so Yahweh says that our thoughts aren't his thoughts. For verse 9, and he goes on to expound on it. He says, "For as the heavens are high from the earth, so are my ways high from your ways, and my thoughts from your thoughts. For as the rain and the snow comes down from the heavens, and do not return there, except it waters the earth and make it bring forth and bud, and give seed to the sower and bread to the eater, so shall my word be, which goes out from my mouth. It shall not return to me void, but it shall accomplish that which I please, and it shall prosper in what I sent it to do. For you shall go out with joy and be led out with peace. The mountains and the hills shall break out in song before you, and all the trees of the field shall clap their hands." We actually sing a song that talks about that. "Instead of the thorn bush and the fir tree shall come up, instead of the briar and the myrtle shall come up, and it shall be for a name to Yahweh, for an everlasting sign that shall not be cut off." 2 Timothy 3. Second Timothy 3:16. Some of y'all are there ahead of me. 2 Timothy 3:16. Let's start in verse 12. And we'll read to the end of the chapter. That's verse 17. 2 Timothy chapter 3, verse 12 says, "Likewise, all those desiring to live a righteous life in Messiah Yeshua will be persecuted. But evil men and pretenders will grow worse and worse, leading astray and being led astray. But you keep on in what you have learned and were assured of, knowing from whom you have learned." And that goes back to what Charles said. If it's the law of Yahweh, if it's his word, that's unshakable. That's where the stability is. And while I'm thinking about it, because I know myself, I may forget, that's another thing that leads to that hopelessness and confusion, is that's another word, stability. Tina and I were talking about that not too long ago. That is so important. The reason why people fear, that's another thing that drives fear, is instability. When you don't know from one moment to the next what's going to happen, that's fearful. Once again, and that feeds into the hopelessness. It's like no matter what I do, I can't control this. And everything is shifting. Which is why when Yahweh said what? "I am Yahweh, I change not," he says. He's showing that no matter what happens, he is who he is. That's reassuring. Do you know how reassuring it is that no matter what happens to me or around me, that Yahweh is who he is, that it's not going to change him? Because when I know that he is stable and he is secure, that he is our anchor, and that's what we hold on to. We have dealt with people in our life. There's nothing worse than someone who cannot keep just a decision, that can't make a decision, or that's not stable in their ways. From one moment to the next, you don't know what they're going to do. That's not who we serve. We serve one who is the same yesterday, today, and forever. This is why Yahweh leads. We can count on him. And what we have to remember is just this, because it looks a certain way. It's like this. You know, he puts so many things around us. The moon. There's times when it's black dark outside because the moon is covered, right? Does that mean the moon's not there? No. That sounds ridiculous. Like, no, after you ask that question, that doesn't make sense. But here's the thing. We trust in that. When it's pitch black at the end of the month, and we can't see our hand in front of our face, there has never been a person in my lifetime that has said, where did the moon go? Where does it disappear? Does it really? Everyone knows it's still there. Just because you can't see it doesn't mean it's not there. Just like blind people, just because they can't see you doesn't mean you don't exist. All these things are very simple for us to understand. Yahweh is where he is, and his word stands. But just because life clouds our vision, we all of a sudden think he's not there. Yes, Tino.
Yeah, and even when we don't know something, we haven't came to understand it or know that it's been revealed to us. Doesn't
Right.
change the fact that Yahweh has already established that.
Exactly.
He's already established what he established. So it's us that can understand where he's at. Again,
Right.
it goes back to what we read in Isaiah. Our thoughts are not his thoughts.
Are not his thoughts. And we have to learn to think like him. Our life teaches us to be vain. We'll do something like, I found my keys. The keys didn't move. They were where they were. We were the ones that forgot where they were. But because we're so used to everything revolving around us, we say like the keys were lost. No. We act like Yahweh moves around. We don't know who he is. And like Tino says, oh, I discovered this. I found it. No, you didn't. It has always been. Just because we didn't know about something doesn't mean it only existed when we discovered it. But a lot of us act like that's how life is. And see, the adversary is cool with that. Because then we get back to what my son says. Then when something comes and shakes that, then all of a sudden we are like, what's going on? Where did Yahweh go? Because there have been some of us that have questioned, where was Yahweh? He's still there. He never went anywhere. It's us that have gone. It's us that closed our eyes. And that's why when I'm saying when Yahweh leads, all this is to remind us that he is who he is. He's where he is. He's never gone anywhere. And we have to allow him to lead us in every aspect of our life. So that we don't doubt. So that we can hold on to that stability and to him as our anchor to lead us through. Because life, like I said, will shake us. It will break us. And too many of us then will doubt. And if nothing else, you can read all through Job, and there's a lot of stuff in there, yes. But if nothing else, the key is he held on to the end. And I'm not even going to say it's going to work out like it did for Job for you. It may not. It may work out in death for us. That's how it worked out for Stephen. Stephen was faithful, and Yahweh's like, oh, let me deliver him. No. He died, but guess what? He was delivered. He died in righteousness, and he's the first fruit. He is asleep, waiting the resurrection of the righteous. So let's continue to read. We're in 2 Timothy 3. So he says, you haven't learned that. Remember what you've learned and where you learned it. Verse 15, 2 Timothy 3:15. He says that you have learned from your childhood the scriptures, the set apart scriptures, which are able to make you wise to what? Salvation through belief in Yeshua Messiah. All he's doing is reinforcing the same thing we just read there in John 16. Salvation through Yeshua Messiah. Verse 16, all scripture written by inspiration of the set apart Spirit is profitable for doctrine, for reproof, for correction, for instruction in righteousness, so that the man of Yahweh may be what? Perfect and complete for every good work. John 17. John 17. John 17, let's start in verse 16. This is Yeshua praying. He's talking to his Father. In John 17, verse 16, he says, they are not of the world, even as I am not of the world. Set them apart in your truth. Your word is truth. Out of Yeshua's own mouth. So Yahweh leads us through his word. I'm going to be faster because we got two more. He leads us through his Spirit and through his Son. So John, since we're in John, let's go to 14. Well, you know what? We're in 17 here. Let's go to 16. We'll just go backwards. John 16. Let me find the verse here. Because we just read it today, so I won't read all around it. Tino just read it, so let's just reread John 16, verse 13. And it says what? But the one that comes, the Spirit of truth, it will guide you into all truth. For it will not speak from itself, but whatever it hears, it will speak, and it will announce the coming things to you. Led by the Spirit. John 14. John 14. And I won't read as many scriptures around it because we've read these verses before in our studies. John 14. John 14, let's start in verse 25. John 14, 25, Yeshua speaking. He said, I have spoken these things to you, abiding with you. He meaning while I'm right here in the flesh, I'm in front of you. He says, but the Redeemer, the set apart Spirit, whom my Father will send in my name, will teach you everything, and it will remind you of everything that I said to you. And I just want to read this because we were talking about this earlier. Verse 27, he says, I leave peace to you. My peace I give to you. Not as the world gives, I give to you. Let not your heart be troubled, and let it not be afraid. Because Yahweh has not given us that spirit of timidity or fear. Romans 8. Romans chapter 8. Romans 8, let's start in verse 12. Romans 8, verse 12 says, so then, brothers, we are debtors not to the flesh to live according to the flesh. For if you live according to the flesh, you are going to die. But if by the Spirit you put to death the practices of the body, you will live. Verse 14, for as many are as led by the Spirit of Yahweh, these are children of Yahweh. Spirit-led. For you did not, verse 15, receive a spirit of slavery again to fear. There's one that we just read that verse. Yeshua said, don't be fearful or afraid. We haven't received that spirit, but you received a spirit of what? Adoption. Sonship. To be his children, by which we cry, Abba, Father. The Spirit itself witnesses with our spirit that we are children of Yahweh. Yes. Q. Yeah, go ahead.
So the one with the spirit of fear of adoption, that was actually the verse that I raised my hand up to bring to Tino's.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
I felt like that was a little bit off topic. That actually brought me to Proverbs 28, verse 16.
Proverbs 28, 16.
Yeah, 28, 16.
Go ahead. Okay, 28:14, go ahead.
Happy is the man that feareth always. But he that hardens his heart shall fall into mischief.
Mm-hmm.
Are we talking about fear of Yahweh, or like what are we talking about?
Yes, those are two different words, and I'm glad you asked that question because a lot of times people do this because we speak English, and so it says fear, and what we just read, we don't have a spirit of fear. Then Proverbs said, the man that fears, and actually, when you look in the Hebrew there, it says, blessed man who fears Yahweh. It's not just fears, period, but fears Yahweh always, and that is to honor and respect, to revere Him. That's what that means. That falls under that love of Yahweh. The other one is don't have a spirit of fear, of being afraid. Afraid of whatever, because when we do that, we're saying that thing is greater than Yahweh. Yes?
That same word is in Psalm 119, verse 161, where it says, and it's translated awe there.
Yeah, go ahead, reread it. Reread that verse for me if you see it. Psalms 119, verse 116.
It's Sheen. Princes have persecuted me without a cause, but my heart standeth in awe of thy word.
Right. To stand in awe, to be awestruck in Yahweh. 119, verse 116. Psalms 119, verse 116.
161.
Oh, 161.
Yes.
I'm sorry. Psalms 119, verse 161. Thank you. Does that answer your question, Andy?
Yes, sir.
All right.
Come back more.
Okay, no problem. Outstanding. Acts 5. Acts verse 5, and this is when Peter's speaking here. Verse 29, Acts 5:29, Peter said, it is proper or is good to be persuaded towards Yahweh rather than men. And this is what we're talking about as far as who we follow. Who should be the utmost leader in our life and why? Towards men. Verse 30, and the sovereign of our fathers raised up Yeshua, whom you seized, hanging him on a tree. This one, Yahweh has established a prince and a savior to his right hand so that he might give a forgiveness to Israel by repentance of sins. Verse 32, and we are his witnesses of these things, and also the set apart spirit Yahweh's spirit, whom Yahweh gave to those doing what? Obeying and believing in him. And just like men, instead of them receiving it and praising Yahweh, verse 33, they heard it, they got mad and started figuring out ways that they wanted to kill him. And that should always be a telltale sign for us. And once again, I think for sure, you have people, you ask a question, and there are people that receive it and say, let's sit down and talk about it, sister. And then you got those like, why are you asking this question? Who do you think you are? And getting mad. And I'm telling you right now, if you ever question scripture, you ever question anything, and the reaction is for them to get mad, leave them alone. That's my advice to you. Because that's what I'm going to do. If I make you mad by questioning you, that tells me you're not strong in what you say you believe, and you're the wrong person to be answering that question. I don't need to be a part of that. Yes, go ahead, Q.
Now, Proverbs chapter 20, verse 16.
Proverbs 28:16, you said?
Yeah, would that add a different dynamic to exactly what you're saying? May I read?
Yeah, go ahead.
The prince that wanted understanding is also a great oppressor, but he that hateth covetousness shall prolong his life. The reason why it brought me to that, what we were saying was, people tend to ask questions, almost like a diversion of, like, it makes you think that they want understanding,
Right,
but in reality, they're just trying to, like, set up a snare for you.
right.
And we can actually fall
You talking about the last verse I read when Peter was talking to those people?
Well, the statement you said, like,
Oh, yeah. No, no, I'm saying people and like sisters, like sure, all of us, we should be able to have discourse and talk with one another, to get an understand, like what you're doing right now. You're asking for understanding. Now, what do you think everyone watching would feel like, and justifiably, by the way, if you're asking a question, I'm like, why do you keep asking me these questions? What you mean? What do you mean the rule is just, and I just come at you and you'd be like, I'm trying to get understanding here. You know, Larry just read the verse last week about those who were, what, patient with the brethren, who were apt to teach. That's also a characteristic. If you don't want to discuss your walk, then don't discuss your walk, but don't be at people, don't come for people just because they are trying to get understanding. And anyone who feels like a questioning, like a policy or a doctrine is questioning them, and that's why I said, let's not be confused about who's in charge. Yahweh's the one in charge. I'm asking you why you are taking Yahweh's word and interpreting it to mean something else or to mean this. How did you get here from Yahweh's word? Because that's a question I have asked many years. There's some things that groups do, and I'm like, where are they getting that from? So I'll ask them, where in Yahweh's word, like how did you pull this out of Yahweh's word? And then they start saying, well, we had a meeting and all these people agreed. Okay, but what did Yahweh say, though? I mean, how'd you get that out of Yahweh's word? I understand that people agree. We can use that in any situation. But how does Yahweh's word support that? How does it guide that? Well, that's just our policy and our doctrine. Gotcha. All right. So what you're trying to say is it's not of Yahweh, it's of you. And then the response I've got is, well, Yahweh put me here. Once again, says who? It all comes back because Yahweh is clear. In Scripture, Yahweh is clear. When he sent someone, they knew Yahweh sent them. When Yahweh set someone up, everyone knew Yahweh had set them up. It was not a question. And that's why when people are like, well, there's always been a leader. Show me. We're about to read a verse right now when it says how Yahweh leads, and I said through his son. You want to look to someone, look to his son. But even Yeshua said, I'm about to be out. So that what? We can turn our hearts and our minds towards his Father. So that we can be more children unto Yahweh. He's making more brothers and sisters. And we can't do that if we're under him. If you're an older brother and sister, you felt that way when your parents be like, watch your brother and sister. You'd be like, I'm not their parent, I'm their brother. And they're like, yeah, but I said watch them for a moment, right? But when the older brother and sister gets out of hand, they start regulating and I'm going to whip them and I'm going to do this. What does the parent say? You're not their parent. I am. I gave you a specific responsibility. And that's what Yeshua is doing. He's like, I'm not your creator. I'm not the authority. Our Father is. But Yahweh gave him authority to do certain things. And Yeshua is like, I'm trying to bring you to the point. So what? So that we would be brethren. That's what he's trying to do. Let's go to Matthew 28. Does that answer your question, Anthony? Thank you. I want to make sure I answer it because it's talking about people they that lack that. That's the things that they do and that's how they behave. We should not have that mindset and we should not allow anyone to treat us that way. I think I'm going to make it, y'all. I'm trying to read this down to the last 4 verses here. Matthew 28, and let's start. I mean, we're familiar with this. Matthew 28, and we read this last week. Some people call it the Great Commission, but it's Yeshua when he says, and Yeshua talked to them, 28 verse 18, Matthew 28 verse 18. And Yeshua talked to them saying, all authority in heaven and on earth was given to me. Yeshua is showing that it's been given to him, entrusted to him. And he says, and as my Father sent me, now I'm going to send you. Then having gone, he says, disciple or teach all nations, baptize them in the name of the Father and the Son And the set apart spirit or Yahweh spirit will teach them to observe all things whatsoever I command you. And then we once again verifies what he said in 16. I'm going away, the spirits are going to come, and it's going to teach you what? Everything I heard from my Father. Because everything I said is everything I heard from my Father too. There's no contradiction here. That's what Yeshua was saying, and he said it again. And he says, behold, I'm with you all the days until the completion of the age. This is Yeshua leading. This is how Yeshua lead, and this is how he sent out his top ones. Let's go to John 10. Once again, we've read this in John already because we've been studying the book of John. John 10. Let's just start in verse 11, John 10:11. He says, I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life on behalf of his sheep. But the hireling, not even being a shepherd, who does not own the sheep, sees the wolf coming and forsakes the sheep and flees. That's another thing. You know, I wish Larry was here. I'll have to call him and tell him. I thought he was going to be here. But when he gave the example and he said he had some ideas and he came and asked me about it and David about it and things. Look, this is not it has to be, we're the authority. And what we were telling him, look, if you want to serve, then serve. Like he wants to do the his Zoom call. That's a service. And guess what? There are brethren who have said, I really like this. I've heard them say it. And I never heard Larry say, I'm shooting to get 10,000 people on there. He just said, I'm going to have a place where brethren can come and do this fellowship. And I don't care if it's one person that served. Maybe Larry was led to do that for that one person. Yahweh didn't lead me to do it. He led him to do it. And back to Cheryl's point, I'm sure she has been to organizations. I have a feeling that Larry has too, and that's why I wanted to ask him, but I'm just going to say this with the assumption that a lot of times doing stuff like that, people start like, why is he doing that? What's he up to? I've heard people, and not regard to Larry, but I've heard people in the past when a brother, has a Bible study at their house, when they do something, that the leaders, they're trying to steal the congregation away. That is an insult to everyone sitting in this room. That is not something that I will ever say. And if you ever hear me say that, then you put me on blast. If you ever hear me say that. Not only put me on blast, but then the next time someone comes up here and speaks, say, I know this is not the topic, but I heard Yohance say that someone's trying to steal the congregation so that everyone out on the streaming can hear it too. I'm not going to say that because here's the reason why. Y'all don't belong to me. I don't belong to me. That's what we have to understand. Our life has been given to us by our Father Yahweh. Everything we have, including our life, is his. And he's entrusted even our own lives to us to do the right thing. And so he's laid out this plan. That's why he has to be the one to lead us. And if someone does something and they're charismatic or whatever, maybe they're not. If everyone leaves, and I've said this before, even when Dennis was here all the time, and I told Dennis, don't worry about it. If it's just, and even Betty was alive at the time. And I remember one here, I think there were 6 people, and he was a little bit despondent. And I'm like, what's wrong? There's 6 of us here. We're keeping the Sabbath. We're studying the Word. I said, I don't care if it's you, me, Betty, and Grandma, his mother Miriam, and me. It's a wonderful Sabbath day. What are you complaining for? There's no reason to be down. We belong to him. And anyone who wants to magnify Yahweh or do something to serve, to edify the brethren, hallelujah. And if it's nefarious, it is not going to stand. But guess what? I can't stop it. Remember we talked about that hopelessness and powerless? I'm powerless to do anything about that. If someone is thinking nefarious things and has a nefarious plan, how am I going to know? Because even if you accuse them, you know what they're going to say? What are you talking about? I mean, Yeshua experienced that. Yeshua, the son of Yahweh, who knew exactly what they're thinking, he says, I know you're trying to kill me. They're like, what? Who? What do you mean? No, who told you that? And he even played games with them. He's like, look, I know you're trying to kill me, blase, blase. He just told him. He even get into that argument with him. He didn't, yes, I know, and he didn't do all that. So I learned from him. If someone is trying to do something, and I'm not referencing Larry. Larry's doing, he's really helped a brother, and Bob's been on there, Daniel. There's people on there that are really like, I like this. I'm not saying that. But what I don't want people like Larry or Cheryl, anyone to feel like they can't move because they're afraid that their actions are going to be taken the wrong way, because that's been the experience in the past. That's why I'm mentioning them. Because people have treated them like that in the past. And I'm not in their body. I don't know how they are emotionally. Me, I'll tell you how I'm emotionally. I don't care what you think. I had someone tell me that, you're trying to do this. I'm not. Yes, you are. Okay, whatever. I just move on. I'm not going to argue with you about it. But Larry is not as dismissive of me because he's nice. I can be dismissive. I have to work on that. But I just don't tolerate a lot of foolishness. I don't tolerate things that aren't true. So I have to watch my tone. And I'm learning that from those two. Larry and Cheryl, they'll do a whole 2-3 minute build up before they say what they say, because I want to make sure that what they're about to say is not taken the wrong way. Yahweh leads us by his son. John 10, Yeshua is saying that about the hireling. I read verse 11, so let's start in verse 12, because he said they're not even his. Verse 12, I'm going to read it again. But the hireling, not even a shepherd who does not own the sheep, and like I say, we all belong to the Father, sees the wolf coming and forsakes the sheep and flees, and the wolf seizes them and scatters the sheep. Verse 13, but the hireling flees because he is a hireling. He is what he is, and there is not a care to him concerning the sheep. Verse 14, Yeshua is saying this, I am the good shepherd, and I know those that are mine, and I am known by those that are mine. And that's why I tell people when they we're going to excommunicate this person, or we're going to mark them, we're going to kick them out. And I'm kick them out of what? Once again, kick them out of what? We cannot remove someone from the body of Messiah. We cannot insert someone into the body of Messiah. Only Yeshua does that. So while we sit up here and say, well, why weren't they here? Or why didn't they do that? But it's not for us. Once again, we're all here together. I remember Tino and them used to come late. But you know why? Because they were out helping the homeless. I'm not trying to put you on blast, Tino, but because he never broadcast that. He allowed someone to talk about him being late. And he took that rather than say, well, the reason why I'm late because I'm helping some homeless people. Some people who actually needed to be fed and clothed. Same thing Joshua did, by the way. He healed on the Sabbath. He helped those who were needed of help. He said it's good to do good on the Sabbath day. But I remember Tino just took that. He never tried to justify that because he'd rather honor Yahweh, like the scripture says, in secret and let Yahweh reward him, than to sit up and defend himself because the other person actually should have, if they were concerned, should have asked. We shouldn't be more concerned with what's going on in the seats here. That's why if I ask you as a brother, sister, I want to make sure you're okay. Not, why won't you hear? We don't take roll here. The roll is the book of life that's written in heaven. It says, that's why I love Malachi 3 so much. And it says what? A book of remembrance is open and written in for what? Those who think on Yahweh and speak about him. That's the role you want to be written in.
The jewels.
Not the Congregation of Yahweh's roll book like who was here and when and why. That book will give you life. My piece of paper gives you stress and makes me unrighteous. Colossians 1. Colossians 1. I'm sorry, I feel like I'm putting y'all like, if you all, I'm a basketball guy, and I remember my sister, and when they used to come see me play, they'd be like, I like seeing you play, but my goodness, you know, the game is moving along, and then it gets down to the last 30 seconds, they'd be like, that's the longest 30 seconds of my life, because people keep calling timeouts, and fouling, and shooting free throws, and strategizing, and all this, and I feel like that's what I'm doing to y'all. I told y'all we have 4 passages left, and that was 20 minutes ago. I'm so sorry. So let me do this. Colossians 1. And let's see where I want to start. So let's pick it up in 12. The verse I want to read is 18, but I'm going to give a little context. So in verse 12, Colossians 1, verse 12 says, so that you may joyfully give thanks to Yahweh, the Father who has enlightened and made us a worthy inheritance of the saints. And he has delivered us out of the authority of darkness and brought us into the kindness of his beloved Son, in whom we have obtained salvation and forgiveness of sins, who is the image of the invisible sovereign and the right of the firstborn of all creation. For all things were created through him, and the things in the heavens and the things in the earth, the visible and the invisible, whether imperial thrones or dominions or angelic orders or authorities, all things were in his hand and have been created by him. And he is before all things, and by him all things are what? Sustained. Verse 18, and he is the head of the body, the congregation, or the assembly, some say, who is the beginning of the firstborn of the resurrection of the dead, that he may be preeminent in all things. Because it pleased Yahweh to complete all things in him. And I'll read one more verse. And through him, making peace by the blood of his crucifixion, to reconcile all things to himself through him, whether the things on the earth or the things in heaven. And now the final verse, I say it to Lance because this is also one of my favorite verses. And when people have questions as to how Yahweh, it deals with us now, because everyone loves to always point back to the priests and all these type things. Hebrews 1, starting in verse 1, very short, it says, in Hebrews 1:1, in many ways and in various ways of old, Yahweh spoke to the fathers through the prophets. In these last days, however, he has spoken to us how? Through his Son, whom he, Yahweh, appointed all things, or appointed heir of all things, and by whom he made the worlds. That cannot be any plainer. So yes, Yahweh leads us. How? Real simple. By his word, through his spirit, and by his Son. Stable, unmovable, unchanging. But we can have full assurance in. Thank you for your time and your patience. Do you have any questions or comments? Anything I need to correct or restate? All right. Yahweh bless us.